The air hung thick with the smell of wood smoke and betrayal. My ears still rang from his announcement, the words echoing like a death knell in my chest. I'm selling your grandmother's farm for $1.6 million, today. The faces around me blurred, a sea of relatives, some shocked, others indifferent, and a select few, those in on it, wearing barely concealed smirks. That was the day I understood that blood meant absolutely nothing, loyalty was a commodity, and mine had just been cashed in for a hefty profit. If you have a sibling you would defend with your life, subscribe now. 6 years. Every single weekend for 6 years, I drove the endless miles back to that farm, trading city lights for starlight, deadlines for dawn chores, all to help my grandmother. That land wasn't just dirt and crops, it was the soil of my soul. It held generations of memories, whispered secrets in the rustling cornfields, and the echo of my grandmother's laughter as we planted rows of sunflowers that always seemed to turn their faces towards her. She taught me everything about that land, every weed, every bird call, every subtle shift in the wind that signaled rain. It was our sanctuary, a place where time seemed to slow down, and the world outside couldn't touch us. Then she was gone, and the vultures began to circle. After the funeral, still raw with grief, I found a dumpster overflowing with us. My grandmother's meticulously kept gardening journals, filled with her elegant script and pressed flowers, photo albums documenting generations of our family, their smiles frozen in time, and even the quilt we had painstakingly stitched together, each patch a memory, each thread a shared moment. It was all there, tossed aside like trash, as if our lives, our history, was nothing more than refused to be hauled away. The locks on the farmhouse had already been changed. When I confronted my uncle, his voice was smooth, devoid of any emotion. Estate business, he declared, as if that single phrase absolved him of any moral responsibility, as if it justified the erasure of my grandmother's life and legacy. I stared at him, my heart a lead weight in my chest, but I said nothing. I walked away, the image of that dumpster seared into my mind, a cold fury beginning to simmer beneath the surface. That's when Stella made a promise to herself, a vow whispered on the wind, they would pay. The family reunion was a grotesque parody of togetherness. Forced smiles, strained conversations, and the cloying scent of potluck dishes all masked the underlying tension. Everyone knew something was happening with the farm, but they danced around the topic, pretending that everything was normal. My uncle, the orchestrator of this whole charade, held court, regaling anyone who would listen with his tales of shrewd business acumen, his voice dripping with false sincerity. I watched him, my gaze unwavering, my silence a shield. He assumed my grief had crippled me, that I was too weak to fight back. He saw my quiet demeanor as acceptance, as defeat. He couldn't have been more wrong. Every word he spoke, every handshake he made, every pat on the back he delivered, fueled the fire within me. I was collecting evidence, gathering ammunition, meticulously planning my counterstrike. The injustice of it all was a physical ache, a constant reminder of what they had stolen, not just the farm, but the memories, the legacy, the very essence of my grandmother's life. They had underestimated me, mistaken my grief for weakness, my silence for compliance. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The person I trusted most was one of them. The weight of their betrayal settled upon me, a suffocating cloak woven from anger and grief. Sleep became a battlefield where nightmares replayed the scene in the farmhouse, the overflowing dumpster, my uncle's cold eyes. I would jolt awake, heart pounding, the taste of ash in my mouth, the crimson sunrise painting accusing streaks across my bedroom wall. Every morning, the news mocked me with stories of rising property values, each headline a fresh wound. I tried to reason with my uncle, to appeal to whatever shred of decency might still reside within him. I presented him with alternative solutions, ways to keep the farm in the family, to honor my grandmother's legacy. I researched historical preservation grants, explored agricultural co-ops, even offered to buy the land myself, stretching my finances to the breaking point. Each proposal was met with the same dismissive wave of his hand, the same unwavering declaration: the sale was final. He wouldn't even entertain the idea of dividing the land, of preserving a small portion as a memorial, a tribute to our family history. It was all about the money, the immediate gratification of a hefty payout. He justified his actions with hollow pronouncements about securing his children's future, about making responsible financial decisions. But I saw through the facade, the greed that festered beneath the surface, the callous disregard for anything that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. My cousins, his children, avoided my gaze, their silence a tacit admission of their complicity. They knew what was happening was wrong, but they were too comfortable with the prospect of their inheritance to speak out. Desperate, I sought legal counsel, clinging to the hope that there might be some loophole, some technicality that could prevent the sale. I pored over legal documents, consulted with multiple attorneys, each consultation delivering the same disheartening verdict: unless I could prove fraud or undue influence, there was nothing I could do. My grandmother's will was airtight, granting my uncle full control of the estate. The system, designed to protect property rights, seemed to be failing me, reinforcing the injustice of the situation. The legal fees mounted, draining my savings, adding financial strain to my already overwhelming emotional burden. I felt like I was fighting a losing battle, tilting at windmills, my every effort thwarted by the cold, unyielding machinery of the law. The farm, my grandmother's legacy, was slipping through my fingers, and I was powerless to stop it. The days bled into weeks, each one marked by a growing sense of despair. I isolated myself from friends, unable to articulate the depth of my anguish, the sense of betrayal that consumed me. I replayed memories of my grandmother in my head, clinging to the warmth of her presence, the wisdom of her words. I remembered her telling me stories of resilience, of overcoming adversity, of fighting for what you believe in. Her spirit, her unwavering strength, became my anchor, the force that prevented me from succumbing to despair. I knew I couldn't give up. I had to find a way to honor her memory, to protect the land that she loved, even if it meant resorting. My breaking point came the day I saw the sold sign hammered into the ground in front of the farmhouse. It was a symbolic act of finality, a visual representation of my defeat. I drove past it, tears blurring my vision, my hands clenched so tightly on the steering wheel that my knuckles turned white. I pulled over to the side of the road, the engine idling, the silence amplifying the roaring in my ears. I wanted to scream, to rage, to lash out at the world, but I was paralyzed by the weight of my grief, the magnitude of my loss. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the darkness pressing down on me, suffocating me. Images flashed through my mind: my grandmother's smiling face, the overflowing dumpster, the sold sign, my uncle's smug expression. I tossed and turned, my body aching with exhaustion, my mind racing with anger and frustration. It was in that moment, in the depths of my despair, that a plan began to form. A plan born not of malice, but of a desperate need for justice, a burning desire to protect my grandmother's legacy. I realized that I couldn't fight them on their terms, couldn't beat them at their game. I had to find another way, a way to expose their greed, to reveal their true nature to the world. It would be risky, it would be dangerous, but it was the only way to reclaim what they had stolen. The weight of injustice transformed into fuel, a cold, calculating determination that solidified with each passing hour. My silence was no longer a sign of weakness, but a cloak of deception, a mask concealing the storm brewing beneath the surface. The silence was the worst. It amplified the gnawing emptiness inside me, the feeling that a part of me had been ripped away and discarded. I wandered through the house like a ghost, touching objects that held memories, each one a painful reminder of what I had lost. My grandmother's favorite teacup, the worn armchair where she used to read me stories, the faded photographs on the mantelpiece, all spoke of a life that was now being erased. I tried to find solace in these objects, to connect with her spirit, but all I felt was a profound sense of loneliness. The world outside seemed to go on as normal, oblivious to the turmoil raging within me. People went about their daily lives, laughing, chatting, and pursuing their dreams, while I was trapped in a vortex of grief and anger. I felt like an outsider, disconnected from everything and everyone, adrift in a sea of despair. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped caring about anything. My apartment, once a sanctuary, became a prison, its walls closing in on me, suffocating me. I couldn't bear to look in the mirror, afraid of what I might see, a reflection of my brokenness, my vulnerability, my defeat. The weight of their betrayal pressed down on me, crushing me beneath its immense force. They had not only stolen the farm, they had stolen my sense of self, my sense of belonging, my sense of hope. I was lost in the abyss, struggling to find a way out, but the darkness was all-consuming, threatening to swallow me whole. Then, one rainy afternoon, as I sat staring blankly out the window, a memory surfaced. It was a memory of my grandmother, standing in the middle of the sunflower field, her face radiant with joy, her hands covered in dirt. She was teaching me how to nurture a seed, how to cultivate growth, how to find beauty in the midst of hardship. She had said, "Even when the world seems dark, Stella, remember that there is always light within you. You have the strength to overcome any obstacle, the resilience to weather any storm." Her words echoed in my mind, a lifeline in the darkness. I realized that I couldn't let their actions define me, couldn't allow their greed to extinguish my spirit. I had to honor her memory by fighting back, by reclaiming what they had stolen, not just the farm, but my own sense of self-worth. The grief was still there, the anger still burned, but a new emotion began to emerge, determination. A cold, unwavering resolve to make them pay for what they had done. I would not succumb to despair, I would not let them break me. I would use their betrayal as fuel, transforming my pain into a weapon. I started small, meticulously documenting everything. Every conversation, every transaction, every veiled threat. I became a shadow, observing their movements, listening to their conversations, gathering information. I discovered their weaknesses, their secrets, their vulnerabilities. My uncle, despite his outward appearance of respectability, was riddled with debt, his financial empire built on a foundation of lies and deceit. My cousins, consumed by their own petty rivalries, were easily manipulated, their loyalty bought with promises of future wealth. I started to see the cracks in their facade, the flaws in their armor. And with each discovery, my resolve grew stronger. I spent hours researching legal precedents, studying financial records, consulting with experts. I learned about loopholes, about liabilities, about the power of public exposure. I started to build a case, a carefully constructed narrative that would expose their greed and their hypocrisy. I practiced my composure, learning to mask my anger, to project an image of calm indifference. I knew that they would underestimate me, that they would dismiss me as a harmless victim. But that was their mistake. Because beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, a storm of righteous fury that would soon unleash its full force. The farm may have been gone, but the fight had just begun. They thought they had won. They were about to discover that they had awakened a force far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. I smiled. I played their game. But I was recording everything. The key was to appear defeated, to let them believe they had crushed my spirit. I even started attending their ostentatious celebrations, feigning enthusiasm for their success. Each forced smile, each insincere congratulations, was a deposit into my revenge account. All the while, I was meticulously gathering evidence, documenting their every move. I invested in a high-quality voice recorder, concealing it in my purse, capturing their unguarded conversations, their arrogant boasts, the subtle hints of their shady dealings. I learned how to extract audio from video files, enhancing the clarity of their voices, preserving every incriminating word. It was a delicate dance, a constant balancing act between appearing compliant and gathering information. There were close calls, moments when I thought I had been discovered, when their eyes lingered on me a little too long, when their questions became a little too pointed. But I remained steadfast, my resolve hardened by the injustice they had inflicted upon me. I immersed myself in the intricacies of property law, poring over legal documents, searching for loopholes, for any angle I could exploit. I discovered that my uncle had taken out several high-interest loans against the farm, leveraging its value to fund his lavish lifestyle. These loans were secured with questionable collateral, raising red flags about potential financial wrongdoings. I also uncovered evidence that he had undervalued the farm in the initial appraisal, deliberately suppressing its true worth to avoid paying higher taxes. This was my opening, a chink in their armor. To confirm my suspicions, I discreetly hired a forensic accountant, a specialist in uncovering hidden assets and fraudulent transactions. He meticulously analyzed my uncle's financial records, tracing the flow of money, identifying discrepancies, and uncovering a web of deceit. The accountant's findings were damning, providing irrefutable proof of my uncle's financial wrongdoings. He had not only defrauded the government, but he had also violated his fiduciary duty to the estate, enriching himself at the expense of my grandmother's legacy. Armed with this evidence, I contacted a lawyer specializing in estate litigation, a formidable attorney with a reputation for aggressively pursuing justice. I presented her with my case, laying out the evidence, detailing the injustices, and outlining my plan for retribution. She was impressed by my thoroughness, my attention to detail, and my unwavering determination. She agreed to represent me, confident that we could expose my uncle's wrongdoings and reclaim what he had stolen. The legal process would be lengthy and arduous, but I was prepared to fight, to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. I knew that exposing their secrets would come at a price, that it would shatter the facade of their perfect lives, but I was willing to accept the consequences. The anticipation of the final strike was a constant hum beneath my skin, a mixture of excitement and trepidation. I knew that the moment I revealed my evidence, everything would change. Their world would crumble, their reputations would be tarnished, and their carefully constructed empire would come crashing down around them. I documented everything, meticulously, obsessively. Photos of the sold sign defacing the property, audio recordings of my uncle's dismissive remarks, copies of every legal document, every financial statement. I even went so far as to install a hidden camera in the farmhouse before they could fully empty it, capturing their conversations as they gloated over their victory, revealing their true contempt for my grandmother and her legacy. The camera was strategically placed, disguised as a smoke detector, its lens capturing every angle of the room, its microphone recording every word. The footage I obtained was explosive, providing undeniable proof of their callous disregard for our family history, their blatant greed, and their utter lack of remorse. I felt a surge of vindication as I reviewed the footage, knowing that it would be instrumental in their downfall. They had underestimated me, assuming that my grief had rendered me powerless. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I even started documenting the ecological damage the prospective buyers were inflicting on the land itself. Turns out, they were land developers who were already starting to bulldoze sections of the farm, ignoring local ordinances. This added another layer to their crimes: environmental destruction. I made sure to get drone footage, documenting the ravaged fields, the uprooted trees, the disrupted wildlife. This wasn't just about personal revenge anymore, it was about protecting the land, preserving my grandmother's legacy, and holding them accountable for their actions. The final piece of my plan involved contacting the local news media, alerting them to the story, providing them with the evidence I had gathered. I knew that public exposure would amplify the impact of my legal action, putting additional pressure on my uncle and his cronies. I crafted a press release, outlining the details of the case, highlighting the financial wrongdoings, the environmental damage, and the emotional toll it had taken on me and my family. I sent the press release to several local news outlets, hoping that at least one would pick up the story. The waiting was agonizing, but I remained patient, confident that the truth would eventually come to light. Their biggest weakness? They thought they were untouchable. That's what made it so easy. They flaunted their ill-gotten gains, throwing lavish parties at the farmhouse, inviting their wealthy friends to bask in their success. It was sickening to watch, a constant reminder of their betrayal, but I knew I had to remain patient, to wait for the opportune moment to strike. The opportunity came in the form of a whispered conversation, overheard while I was helping with one of their parties. My cousin, fueled by several glasses of expensive champagne, was bragging about how they had gotten away with everything, how they had manipulated the system, how they were now free to enjoy the fruits of their labor. He mentioned a hidden account, a Swiss bank account containing the proceeds from the sale of the farm, an account that my uncle had conveniently forgotten to declare. This was it. The smoking gun. The final piece of the puzzle. I excused myself, feigning a headache, and slipped away to my car. I drove straight to my lawyer's office, my heart pounding with excitement. I presented her with the new information, the details of the Swiss bank account, the proof of their hidden wealth. Her eyes lit up. This was more than enough to bring them down, she said. This was grounds for criminal charges, for asset forfeiture, for complete and utter ruin. We finalized the plan. The date was set. The trap was ready. The plan was simple, yet elegant. I would lure them into a false sense of security, making them believe that I was finally giving up, that I was ready to accept their victory. I sent my uncle a heartfelt letter, expressing my regret for the conflict, my willingness to put the past behind us, and my desire to reconcile with the family. I even offered to sell him my remaining shares in the family business, at a significantly reduced price, as a gesture of goodwill. He was ecstatic. He saw it as a sign of weakness, a confirmation of his dominance. He immediately agreed to the terms, scheduling a meeting to finalize the transaction. This was the bait. The hook. The irresistible lure that would draw them into my web. The meeting was to take place at the farmhouse, the very place where their betrayal had begun. I arrived early, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands trembling with anticipation. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of my grandmother's words, of her unwavering strength, of her belief in justice. I walked into the house, my face betraying nothing, my eyes focused on the task at hand. My uncle and cousins were already there, waiting for me, their faces beaming with smug satisfaction. They greeted me with forced smiles and insincere apologies, their words dripping with condescension. I played along, feigning humility, accepting their empty gestures of reconciliation. We sat down at the table, the same table where we had shared countless meals as a family, the same table where their treachery had been plotted. The air was thick with tension, a mixture of anticipation and dread. I opened my briefcase, revealing the documents for the sale of my shares. They eagerly snatched them up, their eyes scanning the pages, their minds focused on the financial gains. This was their downfall. Their insatiable greed blinded them to the danger that lurked beneath the surface. As they signed the documents, sealing their fate, I activated the hidden recorder in my purse. The recorder captured every word, every sound. The news broke the next morning. Every major news outlet in the state was running the story, local family embroiled in financial scandal, Beloved farm targeted in greedy scheme, woman exposes uncle's deception. The headlines screamed their guilt, their faces plastered across the front pages, their reputations tarnished beyond repair. The evidence I had gathered was irrefutable, the forensic accountant's report damning, the hidden camera footage explosive. The public outcry was immediate and overwhelming. People were outraged by their greed, their betrayal, their callous disregard for my grandmother's legacy. Protesters gathered outside their homes, chanting slogans, demanding justice. Their businesses were boycotted, their social circles shunned, their lives turned upside down. My uncle was immediately suspended from his position at the bank, his career in ruins. My cousins faced similar consequences, their professional prospects vanishing overnight. The legal repercussions were even more severe. The state attorney general launched a full-scale investigation into their financial dealings, uncovering a tangled web of fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. Criminal charges were filed, asset seizures were executed, and their carefully constructed empire began to crumble. But the biggest blow came when the Swiss government, alerted to the existence of the hidden bank account, froze the assets and initiated extradition proceedings. The walls were closing in. Their world was collapsing around them. And I was there to witness it all. I watched from a distance, a sense of cold satisfaction washing over me as I saw them face the consequences of their actions. I had reclaimed my grandmother's legacy. I had exposed their greed. I had brought them to justice. But the fight wasn't over yet. There was still one more card to play. One final act of retribution that would solidify their downfall and ensure that they would never forget what they had done. The day they tried to finish me, they finished themselves. The meeting at the farmhouse, ostensibly to finalize the sale of my shares, was the stage for my final act. As my uncle and cousins celebrated their apparent victory, I calmly reached into my briefcase and pulled out a USB drive. "Before we finalize this," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, "there's something you should see." I plugged the drive into the farmhouse television, a large screen they had installed to flaunt their success. The screen flickered, and then the room was filled with images, drone footage of the ravaged fields, the uprooted trees, the desecrated land. Then came the audio recordings, my uncle's dismissive remarks about my grandmother, my cousins' drunken boasts about their deception, their callous laughter as they plotted their scheme. But the climax was the hidden camera footage, the unedited recording of their gloating session in the farmhouse. Their faces, contorted with greed and arrogance, filled the screen. Their words, dripping with contempt and malice, echoed through the room. The color drained from their faces as they watched, their smug expressions replaced with horror and disbelief. The room fell silent, save for the voices on the television, their own voices condemning them. I watched them crumble, their carefully constructed facade shattering before my eyes. My uncle, the mastermind of the operation, looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. My cousins, usually so confident and brash, were reduced to trembling wrecks, their faces pale and drawn. What is this?" my uncle stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "This," I said, my voice ringing with righteous fury, "is justice." I ejected the USB drive from the television and turned to face them, my eyes blazing with anger. "Everything you stole, everything you destroyed, it ends now." I walked out of the farmhouse, leaving them to wallow in their guilt and despair. As I drove away, I could hear their shouts of rage and desperation, but I didn't look back. I knew that their world was about to implode, and I had no desire to witness their downfall. The fallout was swift and brutal. The Swiss authorities, armed with the evidence of the hidden bank account, moved quickly to freeze their assets and initiate extradition proceedings. My uncle, facing criminal charges and the prospect of years in prison, attempted to flee the country, only to be apprehended at the airport, his passport confiscated, his dreams of escape shattered. My cousins, their professional reputations in tatters, were ostracized by their peers, their careers in ruins. Their lavish lifestyle, built on lies and deceit, was stripped away, leaving them with nothing but shame and regret. But the most satisfying consequence was the restoration of my grandmother's legacy. The farm, now under the control of the authorities, was placed in a trust, dedicated to preserving its natural beauty and honoring my grandmother's memory. The land developers, facing legal action and public condemnation, were forced to abandon their project, leaving the ravaged fields to slowly heal and regenerate. The local community, once divided by suspicion and resentment, rallied together to support the farm, organizing volunteer efforts to restore the land and rebuild the farmhouse. As I watched the community come together, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment wash over me. I had not only avenged my grandmother's legacy, but I had also helped to heal the wounds that their greed had inflicted upon the community. I received a call from my lawyer, informing me that the authorities were planning to press charges against my uncle and cousins. The evidence I had provided was overwhelming, and the case against them was airtight. She wanted to know if I wanted to be present during the trial, but I declined. I had already achieved my goal. I had exposed their crimes, reclaimed what they had stolen, and brought them to justice. There was nothing more for me to witness. I learned that the trial was a mere formality. Faced with overwhelming evidence, my uncle and cousins pleaded guilty to all charges. They were sentenced to lengthy prison terms, their lives irrevocably altered by their greed and deceit. The farmhouse, once a symbol of their triumph, now stood as a monument to their downfall, a stark reminder of the consequences of their actions. I made a trip back to the farm, to see the progress that had been made in restoring the land. As I walked through the fields, I could feel my grandmother's presence, her spirit watching over me, her legacy secured. I smiled, a genuine smile this time, a smile of peace and contentment. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's about reclaiming what was stolen, about holding people accountable for their actions, about protecting the innocent from harm. It's about standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult, even when it's dangerous. It's about honoring the memory of those who have been wronged, and ensuring that their legacy lives on. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.